response to conventional and non-conventional emergency. First lecturer for the opening speech is Professor Alombis, my great honor for me. And the title will be New Challenges for the Preparedness and Improvement of Safety and Security, Factors in Case of Disaster and Emergency. Please, Professor Alombis.
Thank you, Guillermo. This day is very important for us, not only to celebrate the important MoU with the University of Yale, and I thank, first of all, Professor Vasilis Vasiliou to be here today, his department at the University of Yale, because this is a very important time for us to start this collaboration. But this is not only celebration. My ambition is to discuss with all of you about the importance and the targets of this collaboration in a very troubled day and troubled time of our days in the planet, let's say. So, can you hear me? No.
Because I copied the wrong presentation.
I can say that the MoU is centered on conventional and non-conventional emergencies. I would like to talk about the first one, disasters, natural disasters and emergencies, that are a very important item of this. Yes, is the name. Okay. This computer hates my presentation. We have so many engineers, technicians. We need to face major challenges. Okay.
Again, the title is Cooperation. So
Okay. 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 So when we have to face disasters, normally our thinking is that we cannot do nothing because they are too big, or we don't care because they are too far from us. I would like to say that both the sentences are wrong. We need to face this problem of disasters and emergencies, and these disasters and emergencies are not too far from us.
1 second.
Oh my God.
And people from home are not seeing it. Dove ci siamo?
Ok.
Okay. So you can see in this slide that global deaths from disasters are presenting very, very big numbers all over the 20th centuries. But at the same time, improved food security, resilience to other disasters, and better national and international responses mean that the world has not experienced death tolls of this scale in many decades. Unfortunately, this trend does not mean that disasters has become less frequent or less intense. It means the world today is much better at preventing deaths from disaster than in the past. This will become increasingly important in our response and adaptation to climate change. This is the real problem. And you can see on the left the global disaster losses and share of GDP from 1999 to 2017, and on the right the global weather disasters. And you can see very easily the difference from two graphs are very slight, in the sense that weather disasters are the most important fraction of the total disasters. The only exception are earthquakes and the tsunami of 2011. Now, let me pose this question. Global warming and climate is too late to prevent. We are set to pass 1.5 centigrade threshold by 2040. And according to IPCC, global temperatures have risen to 1.1 centigrade so far, and already are seeing an increase in natural disasters such as flooding, hurricanes, or other events. The IPCC International Panel for Climate Change report 2022 warned that the world is set to reach the 1.5 level within the next 2 decades, and this is very important. So let's try to respond to the question. And one thing we find that non-linear changes are around the corner, and I would like to do something about this. Most studies assume that temperature trends are linear. Now, research demonstrates that warming trends are non-linear, that warming accelerated over most of the 20th century and is much stronger since 1980, but calculated by linear methods. On the right, you have a graph with an estimation using nonlinear methods and using a sample of 800,000 years. And you can see easily that the growing of the temperature is much more substantial than we were able to forecast in the previous time, reaching 6 or 7, even 7 more centigrades in 2100. Now, there are other reasons to suspect that it's too late to prevent anything. Forests could start to die. As temperature continues to rise, forests will begin to die off. Trees play a key role, of course, in absorbing carbon dioxide, so if deforestation occurs and forests stop growing, it will have disastrous consequences on the planet. And on the other side, the sea level will continue to rise. As global warming occurs, ice caps melt at a rapid pace, meaning sea level rise and 1,000 cities around coastal areas are in danger. Let me give you some examples. You probably remember the disaster in Valtellina with strong winds at 109 kilometers that in few hours destroyed 1.5 million cubic meters of trees. And it will be necessary to wait at least 100 years to see again this forest in Valtellina. Okay. So. And you can see in the graph that in some cases, 1/3 or more percentage of forests are threatened, according to subtropical moist lowland or subtropical mangrove vegetation and so on. So the percentage is very, very high. So we are losing our capacity to absorb CO2. And the main threat to tree species across the world is habitat loss owing to the spread of agriculture, followed by logging and other forms of wood harvesting, livestock farming, and urban development. So other threats are affecting large numbers of tree species, including changes in fire regimes, energy production and mining, and presence of invasive species. So this is a kind of political event that could change drastically our expectations. On the other side, sea levels continue to rise. When you couple together sea levels rise and extreme weather events, you obtain, for instance, the results of what happened in 2018 in Beira, Mozambique, with the cyclone Idai devastation. You can see this photo from satellite before and after, and you can see really the creation of inland oceans for thousands and thousands of hectares of the ground. 90% of Beira and surrounding damaged or destroyed, with a lot of casualties, but also with the destruction of houses in the city of Beira and Sofala. It is estimated that more than 1 million people lost their habitation. 95% of roofs were in zinc or asbestos and were uncovered by the winds of Idai. Operational research, of course, against winds is needed, as well as new technologies for roofs in limited and Suez counties. This is just to give you another example of what is the effect of rising of the sea and extreme events. But you know, we have a long list of consequences due to global warming, melting of polar ice, changes in ecosystems, mass migrations, acidity of our oceans, species extinction, and extreme meteorological. What I would like to say that climate change has already happened. It's not the future, it's part of our present. And if we stopped producing carbon dioxide today, temperature would return to current ones in 50 years. So, of course, it's inertia of time. So, temperature will go up for the next decades before to. And of course, it's not the case because, as you know, we are growing in our production of carbon dioxide, also to think from oil and the new turning on of coal using power centers and so on. So preparedness is, I would like to say, Professor Vasilis, one of our main goals of our company. I do hope, because we have to face this problem with research, education, organization, and preparedness. You can see that in 2021, we had much more events than the mean of the last 20 years. And overall, we had 100.2 million people with a lot of problems, and the damage was 252 billion US economic losses. You can see the top 10 in 2021 in China, for instance. We had flood for 14.5 billion, while in South Africa we had 12 billion with drought and so on. But also the economic losses are quite relevant. The hurricane in USA produced 65 billion damages, as well as Germany experiencing the damage for 40 billion for flood. So preparedness is very important. I guess we have a number of collaboration fields, extreme weather events and their consequences. I would like to say something about the heat waves, healthcare associated infections and multi-drug resistance, because this is another emergency. I would like to say that this is quite important for our health. New technology to viral detection and control, as we see that pandemics, it is not an isolated fact, but probably we have other events of such prevention. Prevention and control of other conditions linked to the epidemiological transition. As you know, epidemiological transition reduced a huge number of people with chronic disease and a huge number of problems of care, of course, forest fire prevention, and also carbon sequestration, carbon capture storage and the carbon capture usage and storage with chemical and microbiological technology. That really a huge landscape. Public health is involved almost in all these sides. Now, let's start to say something briefly about heat waves and cold weather. And you can see that we had an excess of mortality in Europe, both for heat waves and cold weather, between 1988 and 2019. And you can see we have really 10,000, more than 10,000 by year of deaths because for elderly people for this reason. This is one of our last publications, the effectiveness of intervening on social isolation to reduce mortality during heat waves. As you know, loneliness and social isolation are very important for our growing elderly population. It's an epidemic, loneliness and social isolation. It's a very important epidemic. And this is also a risk factor very important during heat waves. These results demonstrate that building networks of social relationships around over 80 people is very important, very effective in reducing deaths due to social isolation. On the other side, we know that healthcare-associated infection have a very, very important weight. Someone says that the burden of disease of healthcare-associated infections is quite similar to the burden of disease of myocardial infarction. And this is some result from our hospitals in Rome. You can see that we have on the left side a number of concurrent infections. We do not have one single infection, but in half of the cases we have two or more current infections, demonstrating that the wash handling is still a problem and still a goal. On the other side, you can see the alarming data on drug resistance. You switch from a risk loss ratio of 6.5 for staphylococcus, for example, to 18 to die by infection when you have drug resistance. For Acinetobacter baumannii, we pass from 9.69 to 33% of deaths, of risk to death, in consequence of infection. Environmental health is another possible goal of our collaboration. This is a systematic review and meta-analysis in which we demonstrated that PM10 is also associated with lung cancer with a risk of 1.25. So that's another important goal to control and to prevent for our cities and our environment. On the other side, we worked on the so-called enthalpy, the combination of temperature and relative humidity, demonstrating that there is a narrow windows in which virus is growing up quite well. And outside, this is the indoor air conditions with SARS-CoV-2, you have a very specific range of enthalpy, which the survival is very, very low. When you are outside this window, virus is growing again. Also, we are trying to develop new methods, but Pasquale Gaudio will talk about this better than me, to detect viruses, environment, and living things. And also, we would like to collaborate on the prevention of pressure ulcers and other important conditions affecting elderly people. For instance, in Italy, 1/3 of people recovered in nursing home is developing pressure ulcers. So it's another epidemic. And we have some evidence that autologous peripheral blood molecular cells are quite effective in reducing the risk of amputation. You can see the two arms in Kappa-Meyer pools of 2 years. And you can see that you pass from 37% of amputation to less than 5%. And the overall survival in the group treated this kind of cells, these are stem cells, had a survival of 80% versus 20% of other. So we can work together on this. On the other side, we are collaborating with the group of Valerio Cervelli to study the properties of ozonized oil that are anti-inflammatory and quite effective in antiseptic activity and regenerative capacity on the other side. Okay, you can see, for instance, that 100% of infections in people with these complex wounds were recovered in the range time of 15 days. And the complete healing was reached by 90% of the population. So ozonized oil is something we need to study better because it's an entire family of molecular compounds. And we need to understand better the effectiveness. But let me give you also another suggestion. The properties are very stable in this kind of oil for hands. And we could study something really new after 100 years of no progress. Because we all know that hand washing is quite effectively reduce the transitional flora, but after 3 seconds, you can be again polluted. Now, if we can apply a system of oil with some capacity to maintain your hands clean for a number of minutes, let's say 30 minutes, it would change drastically our approach to healthcare associated infections. And we could work on also it. Well, there is the entire planet. So a lot of countries need an information system or their health system. We started in northern region of Iraq, Kurdistan, developing this system, and we had a collaboration with the WHO. And of course, this is very important to detect and monitor outbreaks, to estimate the magnitude of disease, to identify that, and to support treatment guidelines. Kurdistan had not at all an information system. They had problems also to report their infant mortality rates. Now we developed, this is a small region, 5 million people, but now they have a good fraction of their hospitals and centers covered by the informatics system and able to report causes of death. And these are our population. This is another important goal of our collaboration, how to implement information systems in a number of limited resource countries, such as Sub-Saharan Africa. And at the end of the story, I would like to say that carbon capture, utilization, and storage could be our side. at least for microbiological methods and chemical methods. I would like to invite from now your experts and colleagues to join us to start also on this landscape that is quite important. Why it is quite important to capture carbon? Because I am convinced that cutting the production, cutting the emission is no more sufficient. I think we need to start to implement an effective method to sequester carbon dioxide and to have some better days for our planet. So thank you all. We need to struggle at any level to preserve planetary kind, and I think this is our direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Palombi, for a nice talk. Is there any commentaries or questions or contribution? Yes. Okay. Yes.
I can make a comment. I think that was a fantastic talk that you covered all the areas. We'll discuss also at the end of the conference workshop. But I see a lot of interactions from climate change to implementation and also to green chemistry, which will give a lot of emphasis on double presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the observation. We move to the first speaker of the morning, which is Dr. Andrea Malizia, and the title will be Multidisciplinary Research and Scientific Education focusing on the developments in the cBRNA area. Please, Dr. Malizia.
Can you see the screen?
No.
Oh.
Now, yes, I can see the screen.
Okay. So, good morning, everybody. I am Dr. Andrea Malizia, and I am working since 2008 on cBRNE here at the University of Rome Vergata. cBRNE stands for Chemical, Biological, Radiological, Nuclear, and Explosive, and basically is an acronym used to, let's say, group all the max emergencies and disaster, both from military, terroristic, natural, or accidental nature. If we want to talk a little bit about cBRNE, we can see that history is surrounded is full of cBRNE events. We had the last one in Milan a few days ago, an explosion in a chemical factory. We can consider a cBRNE event, the Ebola pandemic disease, the coronavirus disease, the explosion of the Twin Towers, because after that you had a huge chemical contamination due to all the building that collapsed, and so you have a cBRNE situation in there. We have a cBRNE situation also in the earthquake of Amatrice. Amatrice, as you know, is one of the biggest producers of guanciale, of bacon. And bacon went down the ground and it started to contaminate the water supplies underground. So, as you know, pork meat is a huge culture to the growth of bacteria and viruses. So even inside the huge emergencies, there are side little emergencies that we have to consider and that are cBRNE as well. So we are trying to put this acronym out of the military world, and we are trying to let people understand that cBRNE is also civilian method, civilian factor. As well as the cBRNE events are related to the industrial accident. For instance, we had many explosions. You cannot think about that inside the sugar factories, because when you contain the sugar, inside the packaging machine. Sometimes they put some boxes to avoid the sugar dust inside the factory. And with the change of pressure, you have explosion and died of person. So you have casualties also inside the sugar factories, for instance. So basically, our first job is think to unthinkable, and we have to be ready almost to everything. What is another CBRN event? Make a wrong communication. So let me talk about 2009. Here in Rome, there was one person who called the police, and he make a joke. He say, somebody leave plutonium, release plutonium inside the Roman pipeline of water. It was a joke. By the way, somehow maybe the person who received the call, called the mother, the father, I don't know, something like that. And in a few hours, the news spread away. What did happen? It happened that in the next 48 hours, we had in the area of Rome and the surrounding Rome, almost 70,000 access to the emergency department, to the pronto soccorso. Now, one access costs to the sanitary system, roughly, Professor Palombi told me, 800, 200, 300. So we had a loss of, dozen of euro just for a joke. So even a wrong communication provokes, at the end, from an economic point of view, the same side effects of a real event. And we are tasting it on our skin on every kind of event, like, I don't know, the war between Russia and Ukraine. If you have wrong communication, you have wrong information, you make wrong decision, and at the end you lose money. So we have to work in a multidisciplinary way. We have worked all together. There is not the unicorn, the full expert on CBRN, but there is a group of experts that has to work together at different level with different expertise. What did we do? We did create in 29 master course on protection against CBRN event. This is just a piece of the directive board. And we built over the year a didactic board that now counts more than 350 lecturers from all around the world, because you need the university professor as well as the firefighters that goes to save people and rescue people on field. So we have been guided from the vision and the mission of our director that passed away 1 year ago, Professor Carlo Bellecci. What is the vision? The vision is let CBRN become a new academic discipline, because before 2008, CBRN was something you heard just in the military environment. We put it in the university, we release an official diploma in the university, and we have been the first in the world to release an official academic diploma on CBRN mothers. What does it mean? It means that we start to cooperate. We start to cooperate at different levels, national, international level, with 4 pillars of entities: university and research center, military entities, public entities, and private entities. So we start from the national level, and then we move to the international one. What does it happen? Among the other things, we receive from the OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, a cooperation agreement. We are the only university in the world that has such a kind of cooperation agreement with the OPCW. And in 2017, OPCW recognized us the OPCW the AGA Award. What is this award? This is the Nobel Prize for Safety and Security. OPCW won the Nobel Prize for the Peace in 2013, and they decided to squeeze the Nobel Prize for Peace in 10 prizes for safety and security, and Italy with us won one of this award, and this is the award ceremony in The Hague in the Netherlands in 2017. We are the only course in Europe that received the status of NATO selected. So basically all the course and even the single module are officially recognized by NATO. We receive it from the NATO headquarters in Norfolk, Virginia. We are one of the training center of the CEPOL. CEPOL is the European police. And we have an important partnership also with the Abu Dhabi Police State Department. This is a paramount important because this is the former rector, Professor Novelli, with General Ashraifi, and it was 2018. And this is important because now Abu Dhabi became a hub of Vergata for the CBRNE preparation. So basically with this agreement, we enter in the market of the Middle East, which is a huge market, but we need somebody to guide us, and we have the police to guide us over there. So it's quite a big deal. We are member of the IEA Association, the International Agency for the Atomic Agency as well. And actually, we are working on the certification of the emergency preparedness response in case of radiological and nuclear events. And of course, this is the slide of today. The slide of today is about the new cooperation, the new convention that we signed 2 September, so a few days ago, with the University of Yale. We reached this kind of goal thanks to the help of the University of Pisa. What does it mean? It means that if in Italy we stop to fight each other and we start to cooperate, we can get great results. Because Professor Francesco De Vigo, who is a full professor in Pisa in nuclear measure, let us and Professor Vasili Vasiliou met in 2019. So we start to talk together and we arrived to sign an MoU. So this is an MoU between 2 universities, but we reached the goal thanks to a 3rd university, that is University of Pisa. And here you can see the people involved in the agreement, but the people cooperating with the project are much more. What are these master courses? We have done 2 master courses. One first level master course for people with a bachelor degree or equivalent title, with the focus on the preparation of the CBRNE first responders. We decided to do this course in 2 years, so we can release 120 university credits, which is the equivalent in credit of a bachelor degree. And then we have a 2nd level master course for people with a master degree or equivalent title, both in English, of course. And the 2nd level master course is open to people with a master degree or equivalent title, or for those who completed the 1st level master course. And at the end, you can become a sort of emergency manager, CBRN emergency manager. So the first one is for the first responder, and the 2nd level is for the management of the event. At the end of that, at the end of the 2nd level, you can access to PhD program. And we have a strong cooperation with the PhD program of industrial engineering here at University of Vergata. The new courses will start in January 2023. The 7th edition for the 1st level and the 12th edition for the 2nd level. We actually have around 450 persons who graduate since 2009. And at the end, I will show you the number of countries we engage in this year. We are working a lot also on social media. Social media now give us the 50% of the students and the 80% maybe of the cooperation. So we are working daily on the Facebook page, on the LinkedIn page, and on 2 YouTube channels. And a couple of months ago, we opened a Twitch channel, and we will start to stream on Twitch in October. So we will start to have a live event on Twitch as well, which is a platform that is hugely followed by the, let's say, no, I am a boomer. What is Zeta generation, right? Zeta generation? Yes, okay. By the way, we are working a lot of that. We have not huge numbers. Let's say 1,500 persons on Facebook, couple of thousand on LinkedIn. But if you consider that CBRN community is 10,000 all around the world, we have 30% of the community engaged on the social network. This is some of the activities we do, and I am showing you this because all my esteemed colleagues will talk about research, so we'll talk about training and education. Education, of course, lecture in class with the PowerPoint, but also visit and training activity, as you can see in the picture over there. These are students of the master working with real chemical agent. It has been very tough to let our ministry accept the fact that students handle sarin or tabun or real chemical substances. But in the end, we want to show even who has to manage the emergency, how it's difficult to wear a mask, wear a suit, and stay 50 minutes under the sun with this mask, because everybody can say, oh yes, we need more people that go in emergencies, they have not done the right job. Put the mask, put the glove, put the dress, go outside in July and work with a substance that one single drop can kill you, and then you will tell me how long you will be able to resist. I stay 7 minutes, and then I remove the mask and I decide to continue to work in the university. By the way, this is one of the reasons. One important thing that we do are the tabletop exercise. Tabletop exercise are emergency simulation that we done in class, and we divide the students in group. We give each students a role, and they play in the team. They receive inject, so they receive information every 5 minutes, like real emergencies, and they have to face it. And we start to push the students, to stress the students. We pretend to be the press who is making the question. We pretend to be the police who is making the question, and they have to work under stress. Drill exercise is just a small version of the tabletop exercise. The functional exercise is a tabletop, but on one topic. We train communication, we train emergency management, and in the end, we have also a full-scale exercise. As you can see, the tabletop exercise is like a table game. So we prepare the Sigma Times is a journal that we invented. So we give press of the journal. They have the map and they have the tag, the card with the rule. But we have done also something in field. In 2017, we have done a full-scale exercise at the Malpensa airport. So we had to stop the airport in the night. A plane arrived, we pretend that we had a fire event inside the plane, and the people who were there had to work together to face the emergencies. Another kind of full-scale exercise we had in 2009 in Civitavecchia, called Civita 2009. Let's say a boat, an improvised boat, arrived with one person with a lot of bubbles and scare on the top. So it's something, biological contamination. How do you handle this kind of situation? Without advising people in Civitavecchia. So all the emergency people involved, they had to arrive, they had to act in the middle of the traffic with mother bringing the son at the school or back, and people going all around the city. It has been very, very interesting. I mean, to have all the people, just to have all the people inside on the site, we need 3 hours more or less. We work a lot also on the grant application. Why we are able to move on? Because we are good in bringing money inside the university. University is a quite strange word. Just a few people have the lifetime contract. Most of the people have 1 year, 2 years, 3 years of contract. If you want to renew it, you need money. You need a lot of money. And there are many institutions that give money, European Commission, NATO, PCW, and so on. In safety and security, so do not believe to politicians. In safety and security, Italy does not use 90 to 100 million euro per year because we do not present enough projects. So we do not miss the money, we miss competences and idea. With the competences and idea, make money is very easy. So there are money at the international level, but we miss idea. We have a lot of idea, we are making a lot of money, so we are quite happy about that. Actually, we have three, between European and national fund, we have around 13 projects running, and a research group that is quite huge with 20 persons, 15 of them paid by the research project. We publish a lot as well, book, publication just on journal indexed on Scopus or PubMed or Easy Web of Science. You can find all the full list on the website, which is cbrngate.com. And we opened in 2013 the first CBRN book series, and actually we have 25 books published, both in English and in Italian language. We organize every year a workshop like that, so small event of 1 day, and every 3 years a conference of 1 week on CBRN. And the next conference will be in 5 to 9 June 2023 here in Rome on CBRN, and there is a huge discount for the students of the university. Here you can see in white, you can see the country that we do not engage. So these are the countries that we have engaged from 10 March 2020 to yesterday. All the world. We engage all the world, basically. We miss just Mongolia, North Korea, but because they have not the Google Analytic control. I am sure that somebody goes on the website in North Korea. And a few countries in Africa and in the north of South America. The one that you see in blue are the people that engage us through the website or through Facebook. And just counter-checking the ID, we can decide where we have to do and when we have to do promotion about what's on our activity. So now, working on the nets, making social activity is important, such as making research and education. So this is, let's say, the box in which we are working, and now my colleagues, also Professor Palombi already started. They will continue with the research part, just to give you an insight about all the box we are working in. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for your vision, which is actually vision, or why vision looks like. And we have to move for the next speaker, which is Professor Gaudio. The title of the talk will be Detection and Identification of CD agents, an overview on the research activities of the quantum electronics and plasma physics laboratories. Please, Professor Gaudio.
Thank you, Guglielmo, for your introduction, and very pleasure your report and presentation here, but yeah. Okay. And it's very, very pleasure for to be involved in this collaboration with Yale University, and maybe that's possible. Do you need? Well, no. I think that I can start. Okay. My presentation is different by previous one. For continue after introduction.
Leonardo and Andrea, but my presentation is oriented on technical, on methodology for detection, chemical and bioagents. And this more technical because it's need every way there is an emergency. How to understand, to measure chemical dispersion, to identify chemical dispersion, to understand bioagents and what kind of bioagents is dispersed in the environment after a treat after incidents. Well, for this way, I like to present what kind of activity we made in our laboratory. Just a few words on overview of the research that we made. We operate laser system for environment energy. And in particular, in case of environment, we developed a system for chemical detection, for bio detection. We operate more in this field, and not only in my presentation, I will present last idea to integrate laser techniques, or detection techniques, for to have integration system to recognize in red zone treat dispersion chemicals. We operate also in magnetic fusion research, but different topics. So present. Also, we operate in software analysis, and we operate also in didactic activity, spatial, master, and coordinate biomedicine department, protection against well, this is my agenda. I start my presentation with introduce the laser system for detection and identification of alarm regarding chemical dispersion. After, I would like to present the integration of LiDAR application and the UV systems, chemical detection and classification environment, red environment, in order to operate in joint responder. And at the end, I would like to show you just the preliminary results for virus. Well, we are able to develop system, known as LiDAR system, that usually are known as radar optics. The system, the core of the system is the laser. Laser is sent in atmosphere, and when the laser interacts with the target, and the scattered signal is acquired. It's acquired by telescope and it's transformed by detector in electric signals. Well, it's possible to observe typical signals that can acquire, and laser interact or dispersion, chemical dispersion of the it's possible to observe over the signal peaks. Then this can be identified as an alarm. It's an alarm due to pollutants, due to a dispersion, due to for example, fire. And then the idea is use system for to detect an alarm. The system is very give information very fast time, almost real time. At the distances, it's possible to have information in a long range, 2, 3, 5, up to 7 kilometers, dependent by power for laser. And this can be used in research for fire detection. We have developed a system for forest detection, but it can be used for fire detection in industrial area, or to pollutant source, or, for example, in CBRN application for detection anomalies due to dispersion of trees, due to incidents of some that happen in the urban or industrial area. Okay. Here I can see this picture of a mass system that we have developed. It's a very compact system. This is a telescope and a receiver system. And this system we have developed for a specific application with source detection in the urban area. It's an example of application. The system is used to monitor the aerosol emission from out a vehicle on the road. This is a temporal marker that we can measure, and it is possible to observe an increase of pollutants over the road, in particular in time, probably increase of traffic. And it's possible to observe several spotlights that give tonight a increase of peaking several points. For example, possible to observe peaks, probably due to a vehicle stop in front of a traffic light. In the same distances, there is a traffic light, and probably vehicle stop in front of the traffic emitted more pollutants in that area. Well, if we want not only to detect an alarm, but we want to identify, is need to know the chemical compound present into the room of the source. But it's not possible to identify an alarm using only one laser. But want to identify an alarm is needed to increase the number of laser wavelengths, increase the number of signals sent in atmosphere. For this aim, is need to use 2 different colors sent in here, and to acquire a descriptive signal from gas plume, and to measure the different assumption of 2 different colors, and by different analysis of these 2 optical signals, is possible to identify the chemical gases present. Well, if you increase the number of chemical gases present in the room, is need to choose several couples of laser lines, several couples of color to send a signal. Then we need to have a laser source that's able to emit more color in the environment. Then is need to have a tunable laser. Well, tunable laser that typically used in this application are a CO2 laser. CO2 laser is a laser, tunable laser that can be emitted. It's about 60 laser line, 60 different color. Here And if we know fingerprint several chemical compounds that we want to know, it's possible to choose different focal laser line, send that to them, and also select several chemical compounds. This is in this picture is the system that we have developed. This is a demonstrator, so it's tested for semi-racks, different organic molecular formation, for example, benzene, ammonia, water vapor, other chemical compounds. But the problem of the system is very difficult to use. It's very complicated. It's not can use, and is more expensive. Very more expensive. Difference of the previous one system is able to only give an output. Then this is an application, for example, of identification system. In this case, for water vapor emission from Chile. This is a map emission of the water vapor over Chile, and great scale on the map show the increase of the concentration over. Well, to reduce the cost of the system that we want to use for give an alarm and identify three in a procedure, we think to integrate the benefit of your with the LiDAR detection system. Well, we think it's possible to use for remote monitoring and alarm the LiDAR system that is able to give a real-time alarm and localize it very large area. And after use, when we localize parameters, UAV for send UAV classify. Well, for the same, we are developing a smart box. Integrate an array of point sensor. This is the scheme of our system that we have developed. Develop system in 3 modules. The first module is an acquisition system able to acquire a signal from sensor, radiological nuclear sensor possible to mount in it, or chemical sensor, array of chemical sensors possible to mount in it in order to classify different chemical compounds. This board is connected by another board that is able to operate as a central unit to storage the data and to send it in wireless mode in the central station. Well, this is a detection unit. This is a box. This is a box that we have developed, and this picture was the mode box in UAV. It's a very small UAV with a payload in order 25 kilograms. And this is a retransmitter box that is able to send data acquired from a range of 2 to 5 The parameters of these two positive developed are decently stable. The two box has very low weight, low consumer power is active POV. Well, and what is the idea? The idea is to make a continuous monitor using laser as a radar. When the laser is localized and dispersion and different concentration in the atmosphere, and localize the point where this different density is measured, it's possible to give a coordinate to your system and send it for exact classification of nature. Well, just to end my presentation, I would like to show you some thoughts for we use laser biodetection. We try to use these techniques for biodiversifications. There are many physical properties for measure the bio characteristics of several methods, scattering and fluorescence, leaves and LiDAR. And we think at the moment we use the fluorescence methodology to try to classify the different type of bio present. The fluorescence can be permitted to what is the fluorescence? Fluorescence is a stimulation that is emitted by the sample when the sample is exposed by the light. When the sample is emitted by light, bioagents if acquired this light, it's possible to try to understand what kind of bioagent. The intensity of the light is proportional to the intensity of the laser that we use is proportional to cross section. This is a typical from bioagent in the mix, and it's dependent by bioagent concentration. This is a typical experiment that we made, which made laser, and it emits a fluorescence signal that we can acquire by optical system, by spectrometer, that acquire a particle fingerprint of the bioagent. Well, we try to take different sample, in particular, this start measure different viruses. It's 4 different viruses. We take a fingerprint, the fluorescence fingerprint of these 4 different viruses, and try using a numerical analysis to understand our capability to distinguish the different signal. Well, in this plot it's possible to see that different color represent different analysis of each virus, and then possible to observe that different colors as very well separate in plot, and then this that able to classify very well the different viruses in the sample. This is just a preliminary resource. We understand what is the capacity viruses that we want to measure. Well, I finish my presentation. Just I say to start only an overview of our research in our university. So, and by the
We moved on. Yes, presentation is from Damiano Pennacchio, Dr. Pennacchio.
It's online.
It's online. Okay. Are you here, Damiano? Can you listen to us?
Yeah, you
make
make one comment.
Fine.
This is a fascinating piece of work, and I hope you all understand what can be achieved with this. The biomonitor of areas through, and being available online is something fascinating. We'll discuss a little bit later. I just want to tell you one more time, I'm so impressed.
Okay.
Let me spend one word on Dr. Pennacchio. I want to thank, I know that he's in a rush because he has another meeting in 30 minutes, but I want to thank him. Dr. Damiano Pennacchio is the head of the International Office of the University of Rome Vergata, and he works all the month of August, even during the vacation, to let the MoU sign it on time for this event. So, Damiano, thank you so much. You have been fundamental to close the MoU. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. We hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
I don't hear you.
We can hear you very well.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for this invitation, and of course for the efforts that you put to organize these events, and especially to create this connection and this cooperation with the University of Yale. We are very proud for it. Of course, I just give a little contribution to the realization of these cooperation agreements, but who work very a lot on these are Andrea Colomba and Professor Palombi. And I just say a few words about the importance of the international cooperation between university institutions, especially in this specific area that is very, very important and in such point critical. All of you, all of us knows that the importance of the cooperation in order to prevent some terrorist activities and to give the possibility to work on this sector to receive an adequate education of course, is very important for all of us in order to live in a very good condition everywhere. Our university is a young university, but is very, very active in international level. We cooperate with a lot of countries, more than 120 around the world, and we established more than 500 agreements in, outside of Europe and more than 350 inside Europe under the Erasmus program. It is very important, and we believe that an international experience, especially for our students, is the key action for the competitiveness in their future, in their working future. And we, all of us, cooperate a lot. We have created a very good condition and framework as interaction between the staff and the professor in order to reach very important goals in these terms. To support our professor and students and also staff, we create and participate in a different donors program in order to establish condition for the mobility of our community, and as well as to participate in important projects that allow our university and our partner to gain the resources that are very important in order to reach the goals and the targets that we prepare and plan. You know that at the events in terms of terrorism, in terms of as we have seen the pandemic and now the war and very close to us, we have seen and experimented that the cooperation, the international cooperation, is very important to reduce the risk and to find the good way to be safe. And I think that today is a very important moment for our university and for University of Yale to develop a very interesting and substantial cooperation in this specific field, but also in the other field, because our university cover different areas, scientific area, medicine, engineering, that are the well-known, economics, humanities, law, and interdisciplinary approach. Nowadays, I think that is the key action for the success. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I apologize if I share with you a very short time, but I am in Barcelona right now, and I'm participating in an international congress where are represented all the international offices in the university across the world. And it's a very huge congress that we have seen the numbers pre-COVID, and I have a presentation here in a few minutes. So I apologize to not continue and to listen this interesting event, and I have listening some presentations, so I found very, very interesting. So I wish you a good job, and I wish that our cooperation with the University of Yale continue and develop in different fields and be successful. And thanks once again for the invitation to participate and to join and share some idea and thought with you. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much to you, Dr. Pinacchio and Leonardo Palumbi. I would like to thank you officially for your key support in reaching this important target that is the MoU agreement between Tor Vergata and Yale University. So you were so keen, so close to us, and you really helped a lot to reach our goal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Damiano. Let's move to my presentation to introduce myself. I'm associate professor of radiology here in Tor Vergata and at the Unit of Organization of Radiology Department. So today my presentation is related on our recent experience on the COVID-19 preparedness for the recent event of the pandemic on since 2019. The title is Unconventional Emergency because we kind of have to deal with emergency, which is obviously a central emergency, and the main access for that is from the emergency department. But of course nowadays, main emergency are related to, pathologists, chronic pathologists, which can be acute or environment passion. Let's look about what can happen or what will be in a common organization in a daily practice in polyclinical program. With the same time managed for diagnostic imaging, for outpatient and inpatient, for interventional radiology, which is a branch of radiology can solve problems, molecular imaging, which is nuclear medicine, and radiation therapy, which is for therapies for oncologic panel tumors. What about the services? We actually based on diagnostic imaging and IR, based on neuro radiology, basing on the nuclear medicine and therapy with radiations. The mix of diagnostic intervention is common for us because we plan same time diagnosis and when it's possible and interventional procedure to solve the problem. We move on synology, neuroimaging, body imaging, of course, and muscle skeletal imaging. And at the same time, we have to manage with the Department of Emergency, which is 24 hours open, 7 days per week. We have units dedicated specifically for emergency, which are CTs, ultrasound, X-rays, and angio sweats. What about the numbers in 2022? Who are our clients? In neighboring, there are around 1 million people which are dealing with our department every day. We perform about 1 key interventional procedures with 40 kilos X-rays, 40,000 ultrasound with 8,000 mammographies and 57,000 CT scan with 4,000 MRI, and that's just 22. What about the assets on 2022? We have 4 CT scans with 2 MRI, 1.5 Tesla, 1 3 Tesla, which is mainly applied for research, 6 ultrasound units with 6 X-ray units, and 3 angio suites dedicated for neuro and vascular intervention, even in emergency setting. The manpower is 35 radiologists, 48 residents, 30 nurses, and 8 employees, and 38 technicians. Why radiology residents? Because we are a university branch, so it's a teaching hospital. So there are people who should or have to learn how to manage for the application of physical elements to the diagnosis and interventions. What is the goal? The goal is to provide for diagnosis and therapy and consultative imaging, even internal radiology, using the most advanced equipment available. At the same time, we have for board certified radiologists and high trained technologists. Last but not least, we share a commitment, which is actually precision medicine, which is personal care, tailored around patient. What about workflow and the organization and workflow? We have tasked the patient be assigned with the RIS identification, which is number PID. With the PID, all the patient status could be found on the PACS system, even internal radiology. So at distance for the consultation in different hospital or different center in Italy or out or abroad. This is a plan for the patient workflow. There is not a plan B, so there's a plan A. We have 520 beds, which are currently interpreted like inpatients, and we work with outpatients, which are sent from the general practitioner, the doctors, family doctors, which is a translation in Italian, most similar translation, and from the specialist doctors. There is a registration that the patient moves for the examination. There will be a medical report in 24 hours. Then, if a further investigation is required, goes back to examination. Otherwise, patient goes for follow-up if any, and then goes back to the doctor. Again, number in 2020, 126 strokes. We are actually the second center in Italy for treatment of stroke in 2022. Of those, 85 were aneurysm in emergency or election. Emergency, which means rupture, which means blood inside the head, which is not good for the patients. We moved to 108 lane salvage for diabetes type 2 and type 1 patients. And we moved for functional imaging, which is functional imaging. It's based on mainly on research and have been 432 functional breast MRI for the characterization, identification, and characterization of breast tumor, which is a social problem. 521 multi-parameter prostate MRI with prostate MRI biopsy in bore inside the MRI and characterization treatments of the tumor. We are the first register in Italy, either from Professor Palombi actually, with numbers of treatments by use of laser source percutaneously, so not invasive, to treat very categorized tumors. So, what about the part of the incomes? The hospital is National Health System Trust, so the entire cost of the exam is obviously not covered by the outpatient. Patients with oncologic disease or chronic disease or genetic disease of more than 65 years or with a low annual income, they don't pay a loan. For patients coming from the neighborhood with different criteria of selection from this one, the exam is covered with a DRG reimbursement system, which is the same application for the patient inpatients. What is the new phase of radiology and imaging in the organization of this department? It's not a single person, it's a group of trained professionals with an international expertise and basically on imaging, not all imaging, on medicine. So our game and our goal will be, as a gold standard, the customized image, which is capabilities of diagnosis and that stop the workflow immediately into the treatment. So, how to combine all of these situations with COVID-19, which was the last enduring actually emergency. So how the question is how to combine the daily routine with a chronic, because now it's a chronic emergency of coronavirus, and academic activity and the teaching of them. This is the argument we played. The cohorts were a preparedness stage, which was the very early stage. So after the declaration of emergency from WHO, we moved to an emergency response phase for about a couple of years. Moving from hours to days, which was an urgent response phase, then an early response phase, moving from days to week, and actually with more than 1 year past in this condition, we are moving from the transition phase to planning or existing exposure situation, which is what now is going on. What about the goals? Theoretical goals of emergency response are to regain control of the situation and such to mitigate consequences, obviously to save lives, even in emergency, to avoid or minimize severe effects, not only for the patient, but even for the caregivers, which is very difficult nowadays and was very difficult at the start of this pandemic. To render the first line and provide critical medical treatment and manage the treatment of people, which is very difficult when you have a virus going around for the corridors. To reduce the risk of long-term effects, to keep the public informed and maintain the public trust against the fake news which were going around this period, and to mitigate and extend practical to cross consequences, product extend practical program the environment, and prepare to extend practical for resumption on the social and economic activities. For this, the medical staff of all the diagnostic department may be requested to serve as a member on an emergency response team, where the roles are very sure each other. In case of emergency like coronavirus, the staff has to be ready to work in a non-routine situation, which is aimed to the prompt action, prompted to mitigate an hazard or the adverse consequence for human health safety, and the patient itself has to be maintained as safe as possible. Quality of life in property environments and that she need to be perceived and as a result. So that's based on screening and triage, treatment, and long-term medical actions. We have medical doctors and nurses and medical physicists for facing that. And people who could be affected at the same time, which are individuals and persons exposed, which are not our patients, which are at the same time workers, helpers, members of the public, very well considered medical condition, age, pregnancy, and etc. So that's a standardized whole hazard emergency management concept, which is spread in this period, which allows for integration and facilities equipping personal procedure communication from different response agencies within a unified command structure. It enables a coordinated response, establish a common processes for planning and managing the resources. Despite coronavirus, the daily environment, we have to continue to assess the dose to internal external radiation or provide background clinical care of patients, promote the safety of patients and workers, promote the use of universal standard precaution as a minimal level of protection when providing care for patients. Assess that personal protective measures are indicated given the available resource. Implement operate contamination control measures. Monitor radiation exposures on staff. Keep staff informed and provide frequent updates to team members. Now design on worker stress, which were a great problem, worker stress. Remind workers of proper use of PPE, prevents them from being contaminated after 12 hours work. Remind workers that time distance shielding can reduce exposure to radiation, inform primary workers about risk association with the efforts. Remind workers not to eat or drink while participating in this response, which was very difficult in Italy. Remind workers to monitor the old dosimeter and request assistant wearing over for the PPE. This is standard PPE adopted in our PTB. Cap masks, surgical gloves, eye protection, of course, 80% dosimeter, which is important. We are talking about radiology. Surgical clothing, waterproof shoe covers. We have to be, how to say, mounted on himself, getting assistance from the colleagues, and the procedure pack was established at the very early starting of this pandemic. These are the common equipment that a doctor working in interventional radiology, an example, is on himself, and it's quite different to apply for this PPA with clamp on yourself. Anyways, we evaluated for emergency in terms of identification, notifications like verification, activation, hospital plane, then preparation, receiving triage of the patient, stabilization, moving the patient to a decontamination if needed, and then patient transfer to the single unit for therapy. This is how the interventional radiology suite was promised in the first early period of this pandemic. So all the systems and all the equipment need to be covered and cleaned for each patient treatment with a COVID-19 infection. So, in the end, we actually meet the patient and in establish so reception area and direct them to the contamination screening area, handle and transport contaminated victims using contamination control procedures, collect information and samples at the same time, which is very difficult, control the spread of contamination. Drills and training needs to be implemented, of course, if there is a plan in place and staff are well trained. From our experience, significant exposure of the staff should rarely occur and should pose reduced health hazards. Thank you so much for your kind attention in this talk. We are open for comments and contribution. Of course, my experience is of the medical part of this pandemic. We are dealing actually for, and we hope not, with the work. So please, a contribution from the staff of the public would be very accepted.
I have not a contribution, just a comment. It's the proof, in your presentation that even in the daily work inside the department in the hospital, knowing and having expertise on how handle emergencies, despite the kind of emergencies, is paramount important, not only for the patients, but also for the workers, for the operators like you. So thank you so much, because you bring to our attention and point.
Let me add some words, of course, for you made an example before. If there is a contamination, the first step is the patient moving to the emergency department. For all the patients nowadays, actually, all the patients move to radiology. They move for CT, they move for ultrasound. So access itself to emergency is an access to emergency department, move to the radiology department. So all the patients in the whole pandemic move to radiology department. There will be no patient without an examination, which can be mainly ultrasound or X-rays. So that's entirely true for what is going on. We hope to be prepared, and our preparedness we gain a good effort from us from the very next month, which will be, we think, more difficult than before. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I have your register on laser application.
My great pleasure. My great pleasure is, I said before, actually we are the unit center in the world which are applying for a laser source in order to make an ablation of prostate cancers. Prostate cancer, of course, is very difficult to deal nowadays. It's very common inside the population and will be more and more with the aging of the population next years. So we have to face with the treatment of cancer. Treatment of cancer and during a pandemic is not possible or is very difficult. We have to, emergency rooms or surgery rooms are dedicated for the real emergency, which are more commonly appendicitis or abdominal pain or hemorrhage and so on. So a patient, in our experience, had to wait for around 1.5 years to be surgically treated for the prostate cancer. What we did is to treat prostate cancer without the use of a surgical room by applying a laser optic thermal ablation of the prostate cancer inside the gland by using the perineal plane, so without opening the patient, without scars, without knives and something else, we could burn the tumors in order to destroy half of the gland or the entire gland. And it was a very, very, very aimed and pioneer focused experience because we could treat, we are the only example in the world we treated for an emergency period like pandemic cancer by use of this system. We are going on playing with this with a register, which is actually available online. Every one of you can enter in the register, and we are networking with all the centers in Europe and outside Europe, which are going on treatment cancer and BPH by use of this source. We hope that in the next future, this can be, an alternative treatment for the cancer, not only prostate cancer, but even cancer in the pancreas or liver or brain or neck and something else, like actually it's working out in the United States. So this, I think, is the main concept.
Thank you, Professor Manenti. Maybe if you will be available, we can arrange a workshop to make a focus on this specific topic, which is very interesting.
My pleasure.
Thank you so
much. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to next presentation, which is online. Professor Gable is with us. Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, of course we do. So, for time, she's.
And I'm not sure who will be controlling the slides. I think it's from your side, if I understand correctly. Or will I?
Okay, you can't do that.
Either way, if you share that, let me have it. I can take care of it too.
We can share that.
Okay.
Sure. Okay.
I'll just ask you then, the only thing would be to, there we go. Great. So if I just ask you for next slide, maybe that would be the easiest so we can keep.
Yeah, just say next. We are ready to go.
Yeah.
Please
Have
your face.
Pardon me?
Your camera. Turn on camera.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
I am now turned on. I hope you can see me as well. Do you see me?
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect.
It's definitely ready. We get a sign.
Okay, so I'm ready to start. So if we could get the slides back up. Excellent. So I wanted to first of all thank the organizers of the meeting for this opportunity to speak, and especially where I'm working in a slightly different topic than most of the group so far, but I think it's very relevant to what's going on. And if you could please give me the next slide. Okay, so what I'd like to do today is give you an idea how we may be able to use bioprinting under emergency situations. And for that, there's 4 R's of 3D bioprinting, three-dimensional printing using biological materials. And no, I can't. Okay, Yeah, so why don't you, yeah, just hit them all. Okay, so there's 4 specific R's: repair, a damage that may have occurred due to a traumatic event, and we've heard a lot of different possibilities there, from chemical to biological to even just exposure to heat and other things. The second idea would be to replace a damaged piece of tissue or potentially an organ, and then using that material that we put in place, regenerate and also restore. So bring the patient back to a normal quality of life following this traumatic exposure that's taken place. If I could have the next slide, please. So why do we really need this in a 3D printed environment and using biological materials? This is going to allow us to have a way to replace these damaged tissues using specific cells potentially that are related to the area of interest. We've heard just recently about prostate cancer, but there's also issues with liver that occur following exposure, changes in the kidney that may happen, and all of these can happen either through a traumatic event or an accidental exposure to a radiation source. A patient arrives in the clinic to have a procedure done to try to eradicate a tumor that's there, and that radiation does not stay in one area. It penetrates other organs and could lead to some issues that are there that are difficult. The same occurs for vascular replacements that may happen following transplantation. You need to have a source before the transplant, for example, with kidney, and so you need to have fistulas created, but over time, those vessels start to deteriorate. If I could have the next slide, please. So this is kind of the classical model for vessel printing. It was developed at Yale with Laura Nicholson's group, along with Mark Saltzman. And what you did is you had a solid matrices, a support, which you see in the left side of the panel. You then exposed that matrices to 2 different or multiple types of cells. And then you put the entire thing into a bioreactor to allow it to develop. And in fact, you were able to create a vascular replacement conduit. The problem with this technique, and this is the reason my lab got involved in bio 3D printing, is that this takes a long period of time, typically 3 to 4 months to develop that vascular conduit that's a replacement. This is not going to be viable, as we can clearly understand in an emergency situation. We have to come up with alternatives that could be rapidly deployed to help the individual patient, or in the case of a large traumatic event, to help multiple patients. If I could have the next slide, please. So that kind of gives you an idea. You need to set up a matrices. What's the problems with it? You have to change in the stability of the patient over time as they're waiting for this implant, whatever type you want to use. Their scenario may decay. The vessel that you are planning to attach your replacement to may also start to decay as well. So it really is not a good idea that's viable for large populations. The hope was to develop these conduits that you could store for extended periods of time, but because they contain viable living cells, there's a time window that you have there, approximately 3 or 4 months before that conduit starts to decay and could no longer be used as a viable replacement. So building these ahead of time is not a way to do it. It needs to be done rapidly at the point when the emergency occurs. May I have the next slide, please? So alternatives, okay, we have to come up with different ways to do it. And whatever alternative we come up with, one of the most important things in there is to make sure that we don't have a rejection going on of the tissue. As you know from transplant, one of the biggest problems is to make sure that the organ that becomes transplanted remains viable and is not attacked by the immune system of the individual. This usually requires large doses of very aggressive drug therapies to suppress the native immune system, which in turn makes the patient more viable to other threats that may be out there. So we wanted to see if we could come up with a way that we could develop something that would work, that would not be rejected, and that would not require pre-treatment or post-treatment with a lot of different medications and pharmacological agents. If I could have the next slide, please. So we chose to focus on 3D bioprinting. And what are the advantages? Well, we don't have the scaffold that we had before. As well known with people that have tried a 3D printer just for entertainment purposes or as modeling in a pre-operative surgical scenario, you can create custom shapes either based on X-ray images or MRI scans and allow you to get a very accurate model to be developed. The main thing that's different with bioprinting, with 3D bioprinting, is the cells become the main or the key component in the print. And that lets us reduce the time to implantation greatly. And we don't have to worry about that solid support matrices eventually being resorbed in the recipient or potentially not being resorbed, which could be the force or an area for producing clots or other infections. If I may have the next slide, please. So how does the bioprinting work? Well, originally when we started in this process, we used what's called a 2-cylinder printer, which was a ribbon-like printer, it's called. And what we had to do was model out an environment that we wanted to have, make stacks of hydrogel, which allows us to give some stable support, because if you envision you're printing with a very flexible, soft material that contains gelatin, hydrogel, hyaluronic acid, and a few other components to it. But it does work. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So that's what you get. There's an example of a 3D printed vessel. It took us approximately 3 hours to create, albeit it's a small vessel. The size of the conduit is limited to how many sort of rods we were to place in there, but it does show up and we can use it. We've stained it with just a normal fluorescein dye just so that it's easier to visualize on a hydrogel base. We put it onto a hydrogel to allow us to give it a flexible support so that there's no stress on the print. If I could go to the next slide, please. So that worked great, but it was still, for me, far from being easily used and allowing us to have the flexibility for the case of vessels to produce various diameter vessels based on the injury that occurred or why we're trying to replace it. An aneurysmic piece of tissue we'd like to remove. We need to be able to put in something that has the right dimensions and easy to make. So if we could go to the next picture, please, the next slide. So here's an example. We made a larger internal diameter, multi-layer, very robust print. The full print is shown on the left panel, on the A panel, and on the right panel shows you a cross section of that print that we could section using a razor blade. And as you can see, it's nicely symmetrical. The inside of the print, we printed onto a rotating stainless steel mandrel, so a stainless steel tube that can be sterilized beforehand, that can be prepared before we want to use it to print onto. The printer is going back and forth over that longer piece of stainless steel, and the outer diameter of the stainless steel becomes the inner diameter of the print. So this allows us a great deal of flexibility to go to larger vessels if we wish to select one, or we can make a small vessel in this case where we're looking at vessels. May I have the next slide, please? So we're going to now talk about actually taking some of those prints like you saw in the last slide and actually using them in an animal model. And the animal will then be hopefully surviving and thriving with that print that we put into position. May I have the next slide, please? So what we chose as a first go through, one of the largest vessels in a rat would be the aorta. And it was one that we could actually access on a fairly easy basis due to our surgical backgrounds and some of my collaborators' surgical backgrounds. I had some collaborators from Japan that were working with us who were microvascular surgeons. So they were used to working in small human vasculature. And in the rat, a large vessel is equal to a small vessel in a human. So we had the ability to prepare this. And if I can have the next slide. So here's just to give you some orientation. If you look down in this panel, this is a fixed piece of tissue showing the whole vasculature of the animal. And you can see on the right part of that panel, it's the aorta. And we chose to replace part of the descending aorta because we could access that through an incision in the chest of the rat, keeping it under anesthesia control during that time period. And if you remember what you saw in this picture, may I go to the next slide, please? And there you see an actual aorta that was printed in our laboratory, that we replaced the existing aorta in the animal and sutured it on both the proximal and the distal end. So the animal now had a totally biologically printed aorta in place for the descending aorta. We then, following the procedure, we observed it for a few minutes after releasing the clamp to see that the vessel was patent and that there was no rupture or leakage around the suture lines. And if you go to the next slide, please. Here's a summary of what we've done so far, and I ask you to look more on the left part of this panel than the right. We've done 10 rats so far with this procedure. We had 4 that we took out through 7 days, 3 that went on to 30 days, and 3 that went on to 60. At 60 was not our planned cutoff. We wanted to take them a lot longer, but one of the issues that evolved was COVID, and with the closing down of university laboratories and animal facilities, we had to terminate the experiments earlier than planned. But the good news is if you go through that whole process, you'll see that the animals survived the surgery without difficulty. We had sham-operated controls who basically, we opened the chest cavity, manipulated the aorta, similar to what we were planning to do for the surgery. And then we reclosed the chest of the animals and compared them over time. Our operated animals with the biologically replaced aorta had no adverse effects that we could detect. They thrived, they gained weight at a comparable level as the control animals, and all had no post-traumatic stress that we could see. At the different day points where we took them out, at day 7, 30, or 60, we did not see any aneurystic activity. The vessel looked healthy. There was no inflammatory markers that we could detect along that vessel that we had replaced with. So we were very excited, and this paper is now getting ready to be sent to Science, the summary work. If I could have the next slide, please. So the next thing we chose to look after, and again, if you think about it, would be the intestine, because again, it's a cylindrical organ, and that allows us for easy access using our initial technology. And if I could have the next slide, please. Can I have the next slide? There we go. Okay, so here you see an animal, again, a rat. That's our model that we've chosen to pick. We've made a small abdominal incision. We've excised a piece of the small intestine, and you can see the opaque looking, almost like a clear transparent foil. That actually is our implant that we placed in. So we made a traumatic incision, similar to what you might have in an event where there's blunt trauma to the abdominal cavity. That could be penetrating trauma, that could be due to an auto accident, could be due to material flying through the air following an explosion. But you need to do a rapid repair while trying to maintain as much viability as you can in the intestine. And here we did a similar surgical procedure. We cut a small hole into the intestine. We then put our print in place. We used cyanoacrylate surgical glue to glue it into position. We then put the intestine back into the animal. And if I could have the next slide, please. And here you're looking 21 days post-op. And as you can see now, between the 2 arrows, that is actually the print that's now being completely incorporated into the intestine. You can see that the vasculature is also migrated through the print. So we now have a viable replacement area to that traumatic lesion without having to do a complicated surgical procedure where we may need to reattach pieces of the intestine that could lead to leak, perforation, and other issues, especially following a traumatic event. May I have the next slide, please? So that's what we tried to do in that particular study. We developed and implanted patches and full-length aortas. The aortas worked very well, and we're very happy with the results. The in vivo intestinal patch was very successful and very exciting to us because we did not implant the cells that line the interior that form the crypts and the villi in the small intestine. But what did occur as we followed the animals out, following 14 days, we actually had replaced that endothelial layer. So we now had both crypts and villi that were there and were functional, and functionality was shown by no ischemic injury, no inflammatory markers. The animal thrived, was able to create and pass stool like before, and compared to our sham operated controls where we just manipulated the intestine, made the same suture lines, the animals were basically identical in viability and procedure with no deaths occurring. May I have the next slide, please? So that takes us to where we are today, and I think for the emergency area, this may actually be even more exciting, although the first one is very exciting, and I'm very happy to have participated in those studies, and we continue on with them. But I'd like to talk about our new collaboration, and if I could have the next slide, please. So here's the new printer. We're now using jet printing. This is a collaboration with HP, from Hewlett-Packard fame, that some of you may be sitting on your HP computer today, but HP also has a research arm and wing. And one of the things that they wanted to work on with us was whether or not we could create a biological jet printing device. And this, I think, would be very important for traumatic situations. If I could have the next slide, please. And here you can see the tip is filled with material. The tip is small diameter, but it is very efficient and very effective. We now have the printer working where we can print 3.5 million cells per minute out the front end. And in this case, we're printing into just a normal cell culture plate to allow us to put the cells that we prepared in there and print across the surface. To give you an idea of the size of it, if you could show the next slide, please. This is the beta unit, and we're holding up an old calculator next to it just to give you an idea. So it's either we tried a cell phone, but there was too much reflectance, so we decided to choose even an older device, a handheld calculator. But it's basically the jet printer is the size of your cell phone. You can envision that that would be very easy to bring into the field during a traumatic situation. The first question that you probably would ask me is, well, that's nice, but how are you going to use it when you need to use larger amounts of material, cells, and reload it? We're actually already modifying the printer now so that we can continuously load with media that contains cells so that we have an unlimited source of cells and culture medium that we can then jet onto a surface that's been damaged. If I could have the next slide, please. So this one I took off the internet. I'm sure many of you have seen it. We have a robotic assistant there, which is, we're heading towards that. Artificial intelligence is working well. In this case, if you envision, we heard earlier in the day a talk where someone was talking about ulcerations of the skin. You could envision that the printer would not look like the one we had that was handheld, but was something that could be placed over an area of ulceration. You could have it loaded with fibroblasts and other antibiotics and media that you would like to have, and you could jet over that damaged area. You could, first of all, do a procedure either robotically or manually to replace the damaged tissue, and then jet new tissue onto the surface. So I think we're going towards a multi-head jet printer. Of course, the issue is how do we get enough cells for that? And that's what we're working on now, to have this a continuous feed model or modeling system. If I have the next slide, please. So let's go forward for emergency situations. The next slide, please. You've seen this out there, and I borrowed this off the internet from Crown Biology. In this case, they're growing intestinal organoids, with the idea being that you can use these organoids to test various agents on, hemolytic agents, or in the case of biological exposures, you could actually treat organoids in a dish where you could apply different materials to prevent viability assay from occurring. So stop if it's a fungus or it happens to be something that's toxic, like a vaccine that went awry, or we could now have a way that we could test different agents to stop that. May I have the next slide, please? So what can we do? We're collaborating with the group right now to do things. If you look at, normally you do 2D cell culture. We're now actually working with that group using the jet printer to do cells on a chip, to make a 3D cell culture on a chip. And those 3D cell cultures we can then take out off the chip and do an analysis of those cells to look for any changes that are occurring genetically because of exposure to any kind of agent, radiation, chemical, biological. We can look at all of those different things, ischemia that may be occurring due to changes in CO2 tensions in the environment. So it's another way that we could jet cells onto a chip and have a testing platform that we could use over a great deal of time and period. May I have the next slide, please? So this is kind of a summary slide, just kind of showing where you could start off. 2D cultures are great. Everyone's been using them now for quite a while, since the work from Joe Handler back at the NIH back in the late 80s. That evolved into 3-dimensional organoid cultures where people tried to layer different things onto with Matrigel and that. But I think the next phase, as you can see that I envision happening, are 3-dimensional organoid printing using our jet printer technology. We can actually make a multi-layered print so that we can look at various aspects of a particular organ. In a kidney, we can look at the cortex area and the medulla, who have similar structures in terms of their tubular function, but those tubules have different transport proteins, and we could actually look at those prints across time and over a variety of different environmental changes. The picture I put down used 3D bioprinted intestine. I know we've had success with the intestine with our other printer, so I think that we could make a 3D bioprinted organoid that mimics very nicely what goes on in both the small intestine and in the colon, areas that are very susceptible to radiation injury or traumatic injury. If I could have the next slide, please. So I hope now, over this short period of time, have we really completed the 4 R's of tissue engineering using bioprinting? I think we have, and I think we are going to be able to regenerate and restore healthy tissues so that the individual that was affected, or individuals, will return to a normal, viable, productive life in a shorter period of time following that type of emergency situation. And if I could have the last slide, please. I believe the last one. Yeah, so this is just a quick summary. You can't do this work without a lot of different people and a lot of different groups. Much of the work has been done at Yale in my laboratory. I've also worked with Organovo, who provided us the original printer, and now HP Labs that gives us the new printer. I think the last slide is just to say thank you. So if I could have that last one. Thank you very much. And I tried to stay on time, but I get excited and love to talk about what I'm doing. But I'm going to stop here, and thank you again to the organizers for the opportunity to present today.
Is there a question from the audience, or we're done? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor.
So we move to the last communication of the day before election, which is from Professor Enrico Pisa, and the talk will be on R&D of Pisa, Yale, and Vergata, cooperation in the field of R and treat management. Francesco, sei con noi? Francesco, can you hear us?
Microfono spento.
Sorry, can you now hear me?
Yeah, fine.
All right, let me, do you see my screen?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so let me see if I can switch to presentation mode. And do you see one or two slides? Just one, I hope. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can see one slide.
One slide.
Okay, very good. Because I have two screens and I never know which one is displaying. So as you said, the title is the research and development work that we're doing in this cooperation that I hope will actually expand to include the Pierce Laboratory with Professor Geibel. You've heard the incredibly exciting type of work that is done there. And I've had the pleasure of meeting him and seeing what they do. I find it extremely close to our interests. What I will present quickly are some of the activities, and it will be really just an overview, mainly pictures, of the work that we do in the field of radiological and nuclear threat reduction and management. And the concerns when it comes to radiological and nuclear issues is really multiple. We are concerned about safety, security, safeguards. These are the famous 3 S's that characterize that area, and they have to do safety with the possibility of accidents whose consequences we want to minimize. Security is when we're concerned about malicious use of radiation and radioactivity by individuals. And safeguards is when we want to prevent state actors from misusing radiation or radioactivity. Now, in the nuclear field, this involves many activities. As you can see in the slide, they start from the extraction, the mining of the materials, the minerals that are needed for the nuclear fuel cycle, to the actual construction of a plant, the commissioning, the operation, and the decommissioning. These are all crucial phases that are potentially offering opportunities for those who have bad intentions and want to use weaknesses of the system. Transport to use of nuclear and radioactive materials are as well some weak links of the operations. So the collaboration that I hope will now include Pierce Lab, and that's why I've put the name there, is trying to address all the aspects of the radiological or RN threats. And they involve preparedness and response. And I'll mention the work that is done at the Yale Center for Emergency Preparedness Disaster Response that I'm affiliated to. They have to do with the interdiction, that is stopping, preventing sources from being introduced in a country and then used. What we do in terms of safeguards, what we do in terms of verifications. Unfortunately, in this period, the issue of verifications, that is making sure that the nuclear arsenals are under control, is far from reality. Right now, we're just concerned that they may be used, not that their number may be modified or their purpose may be modified. And then I'll quickly touch upon the issue of training. Of course, you've heard from Andrea, from Professor Malizia, the work that is done in Rome. I have the pleasure of being involved in their program, and the training aspects have been discussed. Now, the Yale New Haven Health Systems Center for Emergency Preparedness and Disaster Response has developed some guidelines that are becoming quite widespread for mass casualty incidents. And these are the guidelines that are, as you can see, reminded in a way by using this acronym, the disaster paradigm. And this is for first receivers. What I'm going to show you, that is how a hospital facility, for example, has to coordinate and operate when it comes to dealing with a case of mass casualty. So these are the letters that form the word disaster that are spelled out in terms of detection, incident command systems, safety and security, assessment, support, triage and treatment, evacuation and recovery. And this is something that is actually based on daily practice at hospitals. Now you can see how in the case of a cardiac arrest emergency, the procedures are really following essentially a similar pattern, a similar scheme. So the event is detected and a patient is checked for responsiveness, breathing, pulse. A command center is quickly set up. So there's a person that assumes responsibility. Sometimes that's an initial phase, and then, for example, a nurse may take responsibility at the beginning, and then a doctor takes over. Safety, security aspects are very important. They come next. You have to clear the area. You have to secure the area, remove bystanders, all people who have no business being there, and make sure that everybody has properly donned the protective gear, the protective equipment. Then the assessment follows. You have to determine why the incident happened, the causes for the cardiac arrest, for example, and then assess the evolution. And support may be needed. That is, additional staff, help, advice may be required, as well as resources. You may need to do x-rays, a cath lab may be required. And then comes the phase of assessing the priorities, so triage and treatment. And that dictates the following steps. And finally, once things have been decided, the patient is moved out from the receiving area, for example, to the operating room, cath lab, intensive care. And finally, a very important step is that of the recovery, going back to normalcy, cleaning, restocking, and again, restarting with normal operations. Now, this all happens to a variety of situations. And at the Yale Center for Emergency Preparedness and Disaster Response, clinical guidelines have been formulated, as you can see, for biological events, chemical events, trauma burn, and finally, radiation-related emergencies. I've had the pleasure of collaborating with them on this latter topic. And again, these guidelines are all publicly available. But now let's go to the more technical issues that we address within this collaboration. We try to adopt the global nuclear detection architecture that is recommended in the United States. The idea is having, as is said there, a multi-layer approach so that the possible arrival, introduction of radioactive materials of any kind really, is monitored from the very beginning of its possible voyage trip to the United States. So of course, there are still choke points, that is, locations where interdiction will take place, and that is typically at the border crossings or seaports. But we also need a network of sensors that will be distributed throughout the country, because once a device and material is introduced, you still need to try and intercept it and possibly, again, stop it from being used. Now, interdicting the entrance of nuclear material, the so-called special nuclear material that may be used for weapons, is very complicated, because the fear is that it will arrive inside one of those thousands of cargo containers that are typically carried by large ships like the one you see there in the picture. And to make things worse, some of these materials are relatively easy to hide, to shield. The most worrisome materials, highly enriched uranium, plutonium, emit a very faint amount of radiation, very faint energy, and low energy of the radiations emitted. So detecting them with just standard detectors, simple detectors, is not an easy task. What can be done then is using so-called active techniques. In active techniques, you have an accelerator. It produces X-rays, and in fact, it can be the kind of accelerator that you use for radiotherapy. And these X-rays can trigger the production of other types of radiations, more easily detected. And for example, they can trigger a controlled amount of fission in nuclear materials. Now, that's something that we do. So in the lab that I've been heading at Yale for a number of years, we develop detectors that can see neutrons, but they're totally insensitive to X-rays. So we can use X-rays to interrogate the container and then see the neutrons that are possibly present. And here is an example of things that we've actually done in Italy, near Rome, where a company that we have very, very close collaboration with produces extremely powerful accelerators, compact accelerators, mobile accelerators. And what you see shown there is how we use one of their accelerators to expose a sample of depleted uranium and get signal when the sample was present from our detector that is marked there. And the signal is in the form of these red line increasing, showing that neutrons were produced. Whereas, as you can see, the system flatlines literally in the case of the absence of depleted uranium. So now this is something that we can use at seaports, at entrance choke points, but it's not something that will help us if a source is successfully introduced in the country. Then we need to intercept it as it moves through the country. So we need a network of distributed sensors. And this has to be as widespread as possible, as inexpensive as possible, so that we can have many of these sensors. Now, in our collaboration with Rome and PISA, the topic has been addressed by developing miniaturized sensors for aerial monitoring. You've heard Professor Gaudio talking about systems used for chemical detection. Similar systems, in fact, the very same modules can be used with radiation sensors on board. This is the work done by Dr. Chierici, who has studied in Pisa, spent a period in Rome, and now is back in Pisa to carry out his research. So this is the system he's developed, and he's mounted on a drone. And just to give you a flavor of its behavior, you see here how nicely it can detect and recognize different radiation sources. Now consider that this is a very small system, and being able to acquire spectra with this resolution and such clean spectra, this is a delight for the eyes of a person like me that does nuclear radiation measurements. We need something that can actually be even more widespread, though. We need the possibility of involving the public, sort of crowdsourcing radiation detection. Now, let me show you, and perhaps I'll cut it because it's a fairly long segment. This is a video clip, images taken inside the Chernobyl reactor. And you can see some flashing, flickering pixels. Here, see them well now. This is because digital cameras are actually sensitive to radiation. When exposed to radiation, you can see these flashes. They're not really flashes of light. They're energy depositions occurring and producing that signal that really resembles a flash of light. So a group of scientists that originally studied at Yale, friends of mine, have thought about developing a way to detect radiation based on this effect. So they've turned digital cameras into radiation detectors. They developed an app. It's actually based on an algorithm. That's what it is, that recognizes these flashes against the flashes of real light. And the flashes induced by radiation are much shorter in time. They're much more concentrated in space, so they only affect a few pixels clustered together, contrary to what happens with visible light. And now they can use any digital camera, whether it's the one on your cell phone, it's the one in your car that allows you to see that you're not hitting anybody as you park, for example, but also webcams and monitors, as you see there. The app has now been downloaded by close to 100,000 people worldwide. And the good news is that it allows us to see what happens. Here's a map of the data that we have access to. You can now see what happens even in parts of the world where you normally cannot go. Now, there's a notable exception, as you can see there, that is not allowed in China. So they've successfully managed to stop the usage of this app. Now, before I was talking about the fact that we're also concerned with treaty verifications. Nowadays, that's really not on the table. Nowadays, we're certainly not talking about Russians and Americans inspecting one another's stockpiles. But the process was in place, and through a collaboration with Princeton University, we have developed a way to inspect weapons without understanding how they're designed, what's inside. That was a big concern in the 1980s, 1990s, when the Russians understood that the American counterpart in doing the inspections was actually able to gather information, to spy on them. So systems have been then devised and developed that will not allow the acquisition of data that shouldn't be released. And the approach that is shown here is called zero knowledge protocol. And the idea is essentially that there will be a reference object, that is a nuclear weapon, a warhead, that will be stored in a control location, and the others will be compared to it. So the test will only reveal whether the two warheads have the same structure. It will not reveal any other information. And in a simplified form, the idea is that systems are required that will acquire some sort of a radiograph, but the radiograph will not be shown to the inspectors. And in fact, it will be the host that acquires a radiograph. And this radiograph will be the complement to the real image. Here it is. For example, this little creature here would be represented as a complement. Now, when the inspector arrives, she will acquire an actual radiograph, but will not see the radiograph, but rather the sum of the two images. Now, when the two images are identical, or complementary, I should say, the result will be a uniform gray level, of course, accounting for statistical fluctuations. If the device has been modified, for example, the antenna here has been removed. Now, when you add the two images, you will see the missing part. So you will, again, not see the whole structure, but you will see what's been modified. So a system's been developed based on the detectors that we develop in my lab. These are neutron detectors. You see here a series of these cartridges that are sensitive to neutrons and nothing else, the same that we use for that active interrogation approach. And here you see some sort of a reference device, which is actually a combination of blocks of cubes of aluminum stainless steel or missing cubes. And the inspection of these system has been done by modifying the layout of the blocks. This is the so-called valid object, and here are spoof objects. And you see that in the case of valid objects, the signal that is recorded is essentially uniform. In the other cases, you see a structure to it that indicates that there has been a modification to the object itself. Now, the approach was very well received. We published in Nature. It was even commented on the New Yorker, in Italy, in Le Scienze, and other journals. Problem is that nowadays we're certainly not talking about inspecting the stockpiles. There's another issue that right now is a bit on hold, and that is making sure that we ensure that chain custody is in place. So when countries adhere to non-proliferation agreements, they also agree that their sites may be inspected. But we know that they still manage to do things that cannot be detected. Now, the IAEA has developed a series of cameras. You see an image here that monitors certain environments, for example, labs or bunkers, where radiation sources are stored, so that if they get removed, this can be seen. But it's relatively easy to cover one of these cameras and not see what happens. So something, and the other thing is that these are electronic devices, so electromagnetic interference may cause malfunctions. So we've started working on passive systems that may detect the transit, the passage, the removal of a source, and on top of that may put a time stamp on that event. So we've been working on crystals that have the property of being so-called thermoluminescent. That means that when we radiate them and then heat them, we get light out of them. And light comes out in the form of what we call a glow curve. That is a signal that varies with the temperature of the crystal. You see there are some peaks, and these peaks are very important because some of them fade over time. They're not stable. And we actually look at the instability of these peaks to tell when the source passed. Our initial approach was that of using multiple materials. Here you see the glow curves of calcium fluoride, one of these thermoluminescent crystals, that has been doped with various types of rare earths or lanthanides. And you see that 3 different materials with 3 different types of doping present different fading curves. So you now expose them at the same time when the source passes. You look at the signal over time, and the ratio between the curves tells you when the source passed. But we want to make it simpler. So now we use a single material. This is work that is currently done by a PhD student of mine, based on the idea that I offered him as a work for his PhD. And what we're examining is a single material and what the different peaks do. Now you see here the ratio of peaks 2 and 4 and 3 and 4. And it varies over time, and it allows us to resolve the passage of a curve, the first ratio within days of the passage, and the second ratio allows us to see what happens weeks and months after the passage. Let me close with another short video clip that deals with training. We cannot always use real sources or real radiation detectors to train our personnel and first responders, for example. But there's another variant of and variant is not a good word to use in these days, another type of that system that uses the digital cameras. This is one that uses virtual sources. You see these sources here, they have been placed using Google Maps in the Vergata campus. This is the engineering campus. And what you see is the users that are now being trained in detecting these two virtual sources with their phones that have the app installed. And after that, they've been told, okay, now you go out and locate the sources that we've placed in the campus. And that's what they're doing. They're converging on the different sources using their cell phones. And then they will be moving to the next ones until they've all been detected. And I wanted to show you this, and it's the end of my presentation, just to tell you that, again, training is of the utmost concern, and we're looking for ways of doing it without undue risks to the trainees. And again, virtual labs, virtual simulated reality allow us to do this. So I thank you. I stop here. I hope I was clear enough.
It was absolutely clear. On my own to ask for questions from the audience. Okay, thank you so much, Francesco. See you soon.
My pleasure. Let me just say something.
Can I ask you, Francesco? Thank you for your brilliant presentation. May I ask you any information about Zaporizhzhia implant and what is, in your opinion, you are an expert, the major risk in this moment?
Well, IAEA inspectors are there, and what they tell us is far from reassuring. The plant has been disconnected, reconnected to the mains, and that's something you don't want to do to a nuclear power plant. Nuclear power plants are give us the highest level of safety when we use them in steady mode. Maximum power in steady mode. When you start fooling around, that's when you have risks. And that's exactly what happened in Chernobyl, by the way. When they started playing with the reactor, doing tests that had not been authorized, that's when they caused the terrible accident that took place. So things are scary. And what is also scary, and I stop with that, is what's happening on the ground. Because with the retreat of the Russian troops, the possibility of the use of a tactical weapon seems to be increasing. Russia doesn't want to lose this war. And now they've cleared the area, they could even drop a bomb. It would be a tactical bomb. It wouldn't be one of the large ones, but still, it would be the first time after World War II. So that would probably trigger a horrible scenario. Anyway, I was very happy to be inserted between John, Dr. Geibel, and Vasilis, who speak next. I feel that I've had a bit of a role of a bridge in creating this collaboration. So I thank you for having placed me there. I'm delighted to see that Vasilis is there, and I'll let you introduce him.
Okay. Sorry, Francesco. Okay, now we can see you and hear.
Oh, you couldn't hear me? Oh, you couldn't hear me before?
We lost the
last
that's just a few seconds.
Okay. If you could just repeat what I said about the reactor and the fact that it's unstable right now because they switch it on and off all the time. I also said that there's a risk that Russia may be tempted to use nuclear weapons because things are not going well on the ground, and they've cleared their military, their troops. So, you know, the possibility they'll drop a bomb is there. It wouldn't be a large one. And finally, I close by saying that I was delighted to have in place between Professor Geibel, Professor Vassiliou. I feel that my role in this context has exactly been that of bridging and bringing the collaboration to where it is now. I'm delighted to let you introduce Vasilis and stop here.
Thank you, really, thank you.
Nel frattempo approfitto per dire una cosa. La promozione sui canali social era per farvi mettere il like alle video. Se che ha fatto uno solo di voi, andiamo a mettere questo like.
Ci sono anche delle foto di malizia su Instagram.
Ma non consigliamo.
Quelle le sconsigliamo.
Okay, we move to the hotspot of the day, which is the lecture magistralis from our favorite guest, which is Professor Vassiliou from Yale University. And the talk will be on current biological safety and security trades.
That's fine. Thank you so much.
Here we go.
Thanks for having me. We thank Francesco who put me in touch with Andrea, which I can't tell you how much impressed I am with his energy. I thought I was very energetic in my youth, but I think he is above and beyond. You know, everything all the time, even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, he will respond to my email or everything. But anyway, I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited from the day one that we start talking about it. I was so excited about a couple of months ago when we had this presentation about these sensors, which I want you to realize the importance. But what is really more important is how we can combine our expertise and our knowledge, and we can move things forward. You know, this world is having a lot of issues. This Earth, this planet has a lot of issues, and we're looking for not just preventing, but providing wellness to people. And this is what is more important. It's not only preventing, make life better. So I have changed my slides so many times from the beginning of the talk, but I hope, you know, I have a little bit extra time because I want to cover that. What you see in your monitor here in your screen is the logo that I created. I moved to Yale in 2014. And, you know, I wanted to have a department that will represent the real needs of environmental health sciences going on. That was before COVID, as you can see. And you can really see that we have the human being with environmental exposures, food and drinking, which is also part of the environment, as well as medications, nuclear power over there, and also you see the viruses. The viruses were existing and they will exist for quite some time. What we're really also interested is how the environmental pollutants would affect our immune system and make us more susceptible to infectious diseases, and also in terms of infectability and also health outcomes. As a matter of fact, we just, and I don't present this data now, we have done some major metabolomic analysis from our Yale cohort COVID patients, and we have developed a model that, based on a couple of measurements from your blood, we can determine if you're going to be needing hospitalization and how severe the disease will be. Now, of course, COVID is moving on, but we also, we might have something in the future. Anyway, so this is the whole idea that we need to start working and going over. So my department's mission is to advance scientific knowledge about the connections between the environment, as I told you, and health, through innovative research and educating the next generation, which is pretty much in the same lineup with the center here. So just global environment outline is the global environmental challenges, and I call them opportunities, which includes the environmental pollution. As we heard from Professor Palombi, is climate change is a major threat, and also the energy needs, which especially after the war with Ukraine and Russia becomes more evident how much we depend on energy. And terrorism, and I'll give you a little bit, a small taste of the toxic chemicals and chemical threats, and I will touch a little bit on the biological threats and safety, and how we can countermeasure all of these events, how we can really be sure that we can provide wellness to the people. So this is from Lancet in 2018, is the global estimated deaths by risk factor and cause. As you can see, of course, now this has not estimated the COVID deaths, but in general, over the years, total pollution kills about 9.5 million people per year. Okay, this was far ahead from tobacco smoking, AIDS, malaria combined, alcohol use, malnutrition, road accidents, drug use, and so on. So, and as I told you, this does not count the COVID. On the other hand, this pollution is very well studied in air, so we know very well what air pollution means. We start to understand the water pollution, which is very important, especially with emerging water contaminants. Emerging water contaminants are possible toxicants which have not been established or been in the legislation, and people don't know about them. So we drink this water, and even in low levels of mixtures, we still have a pollution which may affect various processes. Then, of course, you have occupation and so on. But the major thing is the air pollution is very well studied, and we know how to proceed with that, but we need to go ahead with that. This came to Nature and Climate Change perhaps about a month ago. And that study is monumental, which indicates that most of the human pathogenic disease can be aggravated by climate changes. So we're not saying that climate changes cause disease, which they might cause another thing, but they really can aggravate the other pathogenic disease. And you can see from warming to precipitation, floods, to drought, we discussed storms and so on. We can have the vector-borne, waterborne, the airborne, the direct contact, the foodborne, and also a number of unspecified. And there's this wonderful picture in there which indicates that the green gas emissions are really responsible for this kind of aggravations in pathogenic disease. Again, this is for human life. And we will discuss how we can really, what countermeasures we have for that. Another paper that came very recently is what I was telling you, how the pollutants could affect your immunity, could affect the infectability. This was talking about the severity of the COVID-19 at elevated exposure to perfluorinated alkylates. This is the perfluorinated, the PFAS compound, which Europe has not picked it up very much yet. You know, PFAS exists everywhere, in the plastic, in the clothes that we wear, the carpet, in the plastics that we have. the food packaging and everything. Actually, Denmark was one of the first countries which had recognized that, but it hasn't picked up in Europe in general very much. So this is it's an endemic, I would say, pollutant right now that can have various effects. And of course, can cause cancer, can cause toxicities and so on. But this shows the interaction. So let me give you, I wasn't going to present that, but I thought I'm going to present you the centers that we have under my department, and that includes the Yale Superfund Research Center. I just got funded for that from about $10 million from NIHS. We have the Yale Climate Change and Health Center, which I think Dr. Palombi will be excited to collaborate with us, and I'm going to present you a couple of our people. And I'm also excited about Yale Oil Science and Health Institute that we're working, and on Wednesday we have the conference here in Rome. So the Superfund and Research and Training Center is a NIHS, National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences Center, that we have developed. And we're measuring the emerging water contaminants such as 1.4 dioxane and chlorinated biphenyls, which they found in the Superfund sites. Superfund sites are areas that have been contaminated in the United States. 1.4 dioxane is very permanent also in Europe. There are studies in Germany which has been found underground and everything. What you see on your right-hand side is the map of the United States with that they have been mapped for the presence of 1.4 dioxane. With the red dots is the reference levels that are above to the levels that they can cause cancer. 1.4 dioxane is a probable human carcinogen, and it is a proven liver carcinogen in animal models. So this center, essentially, the reason I want to present you the center, it's a collaboration between biomedical research and environmental science research. The biomedical research focuses on the mechanism by which the 1.4 dioxane causes cancer, but also we're doing the exposure assessment. In other words, we go to people's water places, we collect the water and we'll collect the blood, and we can try to make a combination between how much is there in the drinking water, how much is in their blood, and then we're looking at the health records of these people and trying to make sense. And we're doing that in two areas, in Long Island, in New York, which the levels are really high, and also in North Carolina, which has really high levels of 1.4 dioxane as well as PFAS. On the other hand, the environmental sciences project, one of them is on developing sensors that would identify those chemicals. But the whole idea is how we can do real-time sensors. If you go to any place on the Superfunds or anything, you have some sensors that you need to take it to the lab, and then you need to get the results. This is not practical. This does not give you the awareness that you need to have to protect your people. This is not preparedness. This will tell you if you have been exposed. So what you want to see is you want to know in an area you go, if it is. And this is what I said. I'm super excited about real-time sensors. So we got one project as well to be funded that will promote that. We also have the Yale Center on Climate Change and Health, and this is to safeguard the health of human populations from the adverse impacts of climate change and human activities that may cause climate change. And the whole idea is this is one of the best centers in the country that we have, and Dr. Dubrow, which I will explain later, is there. So what do they have? Research, they have education, and they also have public practice, which is essentially community engagement. And this is really important. Is my mic? Okay. So in addition, we have a Yale Center for Green Chemistry and Green Engineering. I have a book here, which I'm going to leave it to Andrea and Dr. Palombi, but I will send you another one, which really offers a lot of solutions. This is one of our faculty, and I will tell you a little bit about that. But the green chemistry essentially focuses on the environment, chemistry, chemical environmental engineering, and of course, the public health. So the center works is to advance science, to catalyze implementation through industrial partnerships, policy advancement, benchmarking, round tables, and so on. Just exactly what this center is here, and also preparing the next generation and raising awareness. Another thing that we're doing is, and this is going to be a newest center, is we are monitoring the water in Connecticut along with the agencies, the state agencies, in order to protect these people from PFAS. Just to let you know, there are places in Denmark that people got so sick from the PFAS that they were eating from the beef, and the beef was raised in the area that was water polluted. Finally, we are in the process of establishing a Yale Olive Science and Health Institute, not because we're Greeks, not because we're Italians, not because we are Mediterraneans. It is because the olive oil, it can contribute to what we say wellness, and it can protect, not only against cardiovascular diseases, but also Alzheimer's disease and so on. So we have a lot of course on that, and this was from a conference that we had, and I'll give you a little bit more. So this is Robert Dubrow, one of our members of my department, and he is the faculty director of the Yale Center on Climate Changes and Health, and I would love to get him more involved in here, and he will be on the efforts that we're doing. Also, we have recruited a very talented junior investigator, environmental epidemiologist, which essentially focuses on climate epidemiology, air pollution epidemiology, health, co-benefits addressing climate change, air pollution, meteorology, and COVID-19. Finally is Paul Anastas, which I recruited him in my department about 3 years ago. And he also has a joint appointment with Yale of the Environment. He was on the advisory committee of President Clinton. He has worked at the EPA, and he is one of the two fathers of the green chemistry. And he's very well known. I wanted to have him to present something today, but unfortunately he got hit by COVID very badly on his, but last week, and actually he was given an award in Athens for his green chemistry, and unfortunately he couldn't go, but we'll discuss about him a little bit later. Finally, have recruited another junior, not junior anymore, engineer, just like Andrea. And the reason I recruited her is she had developed those wristbands that you can have a wristband, a plastic thing with a sorber in your hand, and you can monitor what the exposure that you have been going through from the air. And this is through passive absorption. And I had encouraged her to do something with COVID, and finally she did. They have a COVID, but the point is, this has to go back to the lab. What we need is real-time sensors, and this is what I've been talking with colleagues here at the university to work. So exposure to toxic chemicals, very little, and remember, we have a lot of chemicals, but we can go from terrorism to accidents to disasters and to warfare. I'm gonna go through very quick. In the CAS registry, United States, we have 110 million unique organic and inorganic chemical substances. Now, don't ask me how many of those are regulated. I can just have a handful of that. So for all the other ones, not only they're not regulated, but we don't know what kind of effects they may have. 345,000 of those used in the key markets across the globe, and many of those are highly toxic and used in the industry. And you can have intentional exposure or accidental exposure. Exposure to chemical threats, we go to chemical warfare. Everybody's familiar with that, from World War I to Iran-Iraq war, and also to the Middle East incidents that we had. Terrorism,
everybody knows about the Tokyo subway attacks, and the Johnstown mass suicide, and also the Tylenol and Excedrin poisoning with fatalities. And of course, Andrea also talked about how you can have, even in a plant of sugar, you can have industrial accidents that they can cause. So how do we really deal with those, and how do we? Anyway, so just a few more slides. There are new chemical weapons added to the weapons treaty. There is, unfortunately, things are moving forward. So the terrorism, or even the countries, they try to use these chemicals for the war. Okay, in terms of terrorism, according to the Global Terrorism Database, there have been 264 incidents of chemical terrorism from 1970 to 2014. And that's not an insignificant number. And of course, you know, it's really of concern. So for all this, what do we do? How do we get prepared? So the first is develop antidotes and therapeutics. If something happens, we have the antidote, we have the therapeutics. Second, and most important, this is where we need to move towards, is utilize the green chemistry to reduce vulnerability to terrorism. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to go all over, but the book is here. It explains everything from the CO2 to diabetics, we heard from Professor Palombi, to everything, how you can really take CO2 and make ethanol, do the energy, and so on. It's really impressive. So what the United States have done, in addition to the bills that Bill Clinton has put for the chemical warfare, the National Institutes of Health, they developed a program which is called Counteract. And the Counteract, there were lots of institutes put money towards research in order to develop therapeutics for treating chemical injury. So new targets, new drugs, and also repurpose the existing drugs. Repurposing the existing drugs is a very good strategy, because the drug does not have to go through the process of development. You know, it might take 10 years until you get to the market. But repurposing existing drugs, it's very simple. They have already the approval for human use. So you can, if you can identify that. To make a long story short, this program has funded centers, individuals. I have been funded also by this for some sulfur mustard work in the eye. But I can give you one of my colleagues, Pamela Lane from University of UC Davis, and that she has developed medication for better seizure control and neuroprotection that happens with all these nerve agents and stuff like that. So they have done therapeutic development. This is just an example to tell you what are we doing in terms in the United States of developing the antidotes or therapies, or identify the targets indeed. Okay, and now is the green chemistry. As I told you, Paul Anastas is the father. This is the book that I told you. And essentially, what is the green chemistry? Is the design of chemical products and processes in a manner that reduces or eliminates the use of hazardous substances. Just imagine how many of those terrorist attacks you could prevent if the store that you have of all your chemicals, it doesn't have to be warfare agents. It could be just the industry. If you have agents that they are not explosive, if you have materials that they're not flammable, and you can really protect the public. Anyway, the term hazardous is employed in its broadest concept to include physical, explosion, flammability, to toxicological, which is carcinogenic and mutagenic, and global, which is also indication of climate change consideration. So the green chemistry can really take care of, you know, on at least work on all these areas. And it's impressive. People are not aware of how much green chemistry has contributed to a better life of ours. So moving towards to biological warfare, which is an emerging threat in 21st century. So Stephen Locke
wrote in Scientific American that biological weapons are the poor man's atom bomb, and it could be an atom bomb for everything. And we start, remember, I'm not gonna go to details, we'll go from anthrax, we'll go to other viruses, and we'll come to COVID-19. And just imagine what we have with the pandemic here for COVID-19, if that was used as a biological weapon. So it is very important really to get the concept of what it is and how we can really be prepared to, to face this kind of challenges. So this paper that was recently published, it shows they have done a systematic review to identify if the SARS-CoV-2 is a potential bioweapon. And they searched a lot of documents, and they have identified actually that in addition to the first bioweapon criteria, the SARS-CoV-2 fulfills those, but also adds new elements into the criteria of bioweapon. So this is a lesson that we have, we have learned through the process. This is a virus, it affects our lungs, and it can cause death. So terrorism and COVID, the actual and potential impact. It's not only the health, that it can kill people, but also what other effects it can have. Just to give you an idea of how powerful of a weapon this is, and I'm sure that you are very well. Again, this is another beautiful paper from Ackerman and Peterson, and essentially they mention the effects of the COVID-19. So terrorists are engaging in pro-social activities through the COVID-19. There is an increased susceptibility to radicalization, and we have noticed that throughout all the processes, either as anti-vaccine or anti-religion, or the religion going against the virus, or the religion, or people saying, you know what, this virus was lab-made, it was not an original, it was made to be used for warfare and things like that. So it creates a lot of, and just to get the concept of what damage it can do. A rise of anti-government attitudes. Actually, I was on the way here this morning, I saw there was a graffiti on the wall talking about government and, the COVID-19 and so on. So it creates a lot of people, months. And remember, being in isolation, you can really go crazy. Another thing that I wanted to add to all speakers today, especially to your talk, and I forgot to add, there was a commentary in Nature that came out 2 days ago, which indicates in all of our efforts, no matter if it's from climate changes to surgery to everything, we need to encounter social sciences. Social scientists needs to be involved in order to have a better gathering of the concept that they're associated with all these events. Anyway, so another case is inspiration of apocalyptic millenarian extremists, also terrorists working from home. They don't have to go to work, and they can have plenty of time to work at home and get things done better. Establishing the bioterrorism as a viable tactic, and also weaponizing COVID-19. How? I will show you a few things on how it can be done, and some of my concerns that I have, especially for open resources of information that we gather through research. So we have also conventional attacks during the pandemic, because we have actually in the United States, we had quite a few, especially on schools. We still have this issue. Is that due to the COVID? I don't know. And that's where we need to engage also the social science in there. But you have people that they go and, or the fellow in Las Vegas that, went after the people. So you have a lot of things that can happen during the lockdowns. And Also, you have the less secure facilities. That's another important thing. People don't pay attention. You know, look at your airlines, for example. I'm serious. They have been all short-handed. They cancel flights, and you never know what else can be done, because most of the companies, they have laid people because of the pandemic. And now that life starts to come back to real, they cannot really fulfill needs because they are not having too many people. And too many people now, they don't want to go back to work because they're scared of the pandemic. So there's a lot of things that, you know, the social science, I'm not a social scientist, but I think we need to take into account how to do that. And of course, you know, the efforts on the counter-terrorism has been decreased because of all these lockdowns and not these efforts to continue. How much time do I
You are the guest speaker.
All right. So this is, there was again another nice paper very recently published with all the mutations. The viruses exist and the viruses evolve and adapt. That's another bad thing for us. And we know that from many viruses, or even from influenza and also with the COVID. So in order, they are heavily mutated, and we notice that quite a bit, essentially, with all the mutations that we have. And this, it tells you all the variants, they call them variants of concern, and I have a slide to explain you what is the variants of concern or of interest. So this is a map of all these mutations that they have existed into the virus, and you know, this can create problems in terms of, we all know, my friend was vaccinated 4 times and he got he got infected twice, right? So that means that there is a new variant which can bypass your immune system, or the immune system does not work that much. The other thing is what other factors that they have that they can increase the infectability. Anyway, to make a long story short, the virus evolves with mutations that can really survive the efforts. And we know that from not only from the viruses, we know that from bacteria, we know that from pesticides, from animals and pesticides that they create specific mutation, and the most important thing, the antibiotics, right? Antibiotic resistance. So the bacteria develop mutations in order to survive. And this is a process that can go back to the evolution from the plant and animal warfare that they were doing in terms of trying to survive, the plants from the animals and so on. So these are the mutations, and again, this is the European, I put the European center, I didn't put, but also it's been adapted from United States system, is the variants of concern. This is a clear evidence that indicates the significant impact or transmissibility, severity, and or immunity that is likely to have an impact on epidemiological situation. In other words, in larger population. You have the variants of interest, and for this evidence is available on genomic properties, epidemiological evidence, or in vitro evidence that could imply significant impact on transmissibility, severity, and or immunity, realistically having an impact on the epidemiological situation, but it's not good. So, and also there is the last category, the variants under monitoring. This is various mutations that they have been identified through the deep sequencing, the next generation sequencing of the genome of the virus, but we don't have sufficient evidence yet to say that this can have an impact on human health at any level. And in this slide, I thought I could have done a better job, but I hope you can see it. This is you can see the ACE receptor, and then you have the spike glycoprotein, the S glycoprotein, which is at the surface of the variant. And you can see that you can have all these mutations, especially on the time of the recognition of the binding site, okay? Which essentially it's the site that you're trying to develop your antibodies, that you can have that, you know, and you can develop this. So this is very important. Again, this is the evolution. I hope God help us that we don't find another mutation for this fall or winter, and we go back to this, because I see some spikes in the incidence of the COVID throughout the countries, throughout the world. Anyway, so what do we do? How are we really gonna work on that? And I'm gonna give you some of the general aspects. I'm gonna give you one, the conclusion that the UN has of how we can do in general for terrorism. But essentially, if we start from bioterrorism, let's say even before COVID, what were we doing? Or let's say that COVID or the SARS-CoV-2 goes away, just like Ebola, we put it on the side, or the Zika virus, we put it on the side. How are we gonna be ready for a next spike? How are we gonna be ready for a next incident? Which we never know if it's gonna happen. You know, they have some incidents, a new virus starts showing up in China. And there were actually some rumors that this increased lockdown, it might be to some different, which we don't know. I think this is unconfirmed sayings that I would not believe. But anyway, to make a long story short, how we can really be prepared. So the whole idea, and I had given this lecture at the University of UAE before COVID-19. And essentially this is a wonderful review on genomics-informed real-time global pathogen surveillance system. So how you can use the genomics in the advantage of human health in order to have the privilege of identifying the virus. So let's say that you have in one place, in a village, you have some people that are getting really sick. So we should be able to really go get this blood, have the sequences on time in there, and then you can do the analysis right away over there with portable sequencers that you can identify if there is something going on. So you do the sequencing, you're using the bioinformatics to analyze this, and then you immediately interpret the data and communicate the data throughout. This is the whole idea of essentially translational epidemiology and using genetics and genomics in terms of improving your response and countermeasures for that. So it's very important. Many companies have developed these portable sequences, which are starting to become available. In addition to that, there is portable mass spectrometers that the companies are developing now, and we're actually trying to use those for biosensors. So you can have a gas chromatographer, it's very small, portable. You can have MRI, and you can have a multi that you can identify proteins and so on, just on a portable base. So we need to have some kind of immediate response and do a really good surveillance of that. And this is very simplistic, the idea. On your left-hand side, you can see you can take this blood, you can do the sequencing, you can do the phylogenetic analysis, and then you can go and trace it to the people. And I think Andrea was mentioning about pork and the bacteria and so on is, you know, you can see on the pyramid on the right-hand side, you have something which is from the birds goes to the animals, from the animals. The pig in here then goes to the humans, and the humans is getting spread. This is how simple it can be, and how, you know, this can be also used by bioterrorists in terms of they don't have to come and infect, you know, people. They can infect birds, they can infect everything in the environment. The thing is, what do we do to, if we have cases like that, how do we identify it immediately, and how we're ready for these cases? Do we have the infrastructure to develop the vaccines, to develop the antidotes in such cases? that it will not take 3 years or 2.5 years as we did with COVID. So we learn from what we have seen, and we should be ready for the future for that. This is the important thing, and this is why I think collaboration from all aspects need to be emerged in order to get all this together. So the model of surveillance for BLE breakouts, again, this is how, as I told you, you can have this, and you can have real world and non-traditional data solutions, develop networks for real-time data sharing and leveraging existing research tool and extend the reach of current sources. So something that really questions though is if you have open data sources. This is a matter of security also, because this, if some people that they might be terrorists or they might become terrorists, have advantage of all this genetic material. For example, the genomic analysis of the virus is a public and available case right now, right? So everybody can can synthesize the virus or can obtain the virus. And using CRISPR-Cas9, it can create specific mutations in the virus that could make the virus. Okay, so these are things that you cannot do. I mean, genomic sequencing is available through EMBL, National Institutes of Health, but it's something that I don't know how to, I don't have a solution to that. Anyway, the genomic surveillance has been really important for identifying and tracking the SARS-CoV-2. And also, it's very important one more time, and my dear colleague, Professor Novelli, the former rector, is not here, but he and I will know very well how important genomics for an epidemiological surveillance. This paper just came out in terms of developing antibodies that they will really destroy the virus. And this is knowing the structure of the virus, knowing the protein of the virus, you can really identify them making neutralizing antibodies, neutralizing monoclonal antibodies. And in this particular case, this is one new way of developing tools to go against possible new viruses that come. Actually, as a matter of fact, this is a very, very powerful paper, and they really identify these neutralizing antibodies, and they use it in a hamster model, and it is from the viral load, and it was really amazing. Another way to monitor your public is water-based epidemiology. Well, it can use some genomics, but water-based epidemiology has been taking care of a lot of things lately, and it's becoming a very good tool. So what is water-based epidemiology? It's the chemical analysis of urban wastewater, which can provide relevant epidemiological information about lifestyle, habits, public health, and well-being. All right, so, and I will explain to you the process, how this can be done. Water-based epidemiology is based on the analysis of specific human metabolic excretion products, or we call them biomarkers, in wastewater as an indicator of exposure or consumption of a population served by sewer network and under investigator of other different substances. As a matter of fact, you can monitor alcohol consumption, you can monitor opioid consumptions in an area, and it is well known that, you know, opioids have been identified through wastewater. Now, of course, you also have some false positives, some people that they have some drugs that they put it down the drain and they go to the wastewater. But in general, you can identify it and you can find that. So the chemical analysis of wastewater and analysis of biomarker is the basis of this water-based epidemiology. And how does it work? All those chemicals, they're excretes of residues in your urine. Every medication that you take, it has a possible way of going down, or, you know, it gets break down. So there are databases
you have all these molecular, your molecules as identified with your mass spectrometer, and you can know exactly what it is. So when you take it, you have this, and you're taking, the water, and then you run the analysis, and then you can identify. The other thing is also, this wastewater can go, this can be also done in effluent rivers and lakes. And I'll give you some examples of what has happened lately in the States, which it's really scary. But anyway, you can take the water from there, and then you can identify those molecules, right? You can identify either the parental molecules or the ones that have been metabolized. And this is how you can discriminate between the drugs that have been thrown in the toilet, or if they have been through the human body and you find the metabolites. The same thing with alcohol. You can find alcohol glucuronides rather than the ethanol per se, and you can identify. So then you can go back and you can calculate and you can do the dose, you can develop the model to see which area. And it's the results are really amazing. One of the things that I'm trying to convince some of my colleagues is, for example, if we have high doses of acetaminophen used in a particular area, is this associated with some hepatotoxicity in this population? You can do a lot of stuff. This is a new way of biomonitoring your population, and it's truly amazing. And you can do that for chemicals, but you can also do it for virus. And we did that. We published a paper on the COV2 wastewater surveillance and actually develop a model that can predict hospitalization and ICU admissions. Why is this important? It is important because if you monitor your wastewater, you can tell your hospitals, get ready, you will have some hospitalization. And this is not only for COVID-19, this could be also for the future. If you have something that you can identify, then you can have, because remember, one of the issues we had with COVID everywhere, especially in Italy, was cavalry, right? There were no hospitals. Everything was, there were hospitals, but there were not hospitals available to get this massive amount of people to do that. Okay, so this is very important. This is the tools we need to develop for future, and also for now, biomonitoring and trying to get this cooperation. So as I said, in addition to the viruses, we're trying to do some work in either the opioids or some drugs that can have hepatotoxicity, and then you can monitor the population. These things will be really more important now that clinical data will be available from patients electronically in a particular area. And of course, this has to be de-identified and then can be used. Another important thing is the next generation sequencing. The next generation sequencing on the virus, also on the weather-based epidemiology. In particular, in this study here, we have identified that the Delta variant is entirely substituted by the Omicron variant in the area of Athens. And this is really amazing how you can really biomonitor which kind of variant you have in your population and everything. So these are the tools that we people have developed, and we're trying to utilize, and we're developing new ones. And essentially, remember, it's not only the analysis, it's also the modeling. It's also a lot of things that have to be taken care of. So the United Nations has issued some guidelines of what we need to do in terms of the terrorism, and this is what I'm going to bring again, the social and actually behavioral sciences into the table, that we need to encounter them for effective and uncountable criminal justice responses to terrorism, increased international cooperations related to terrorism and its financing. This is exactly one of the purposes of our center, is how to expand that, how to get more funding in terms to develop new tools, as you heard from Andrea,
applications of human rights compliance measures to prevent terrorism and protect its victims, and better programs to prevent and counter violent extremism, which can lead to terrorism. So this is the steps that we need to take and really be sure that you think exactly of how we can move forward. We need to have collaborations, and we need to have innovation through collaborations, and we can do that. I'm going to close with what we're trying to develop with all I mentioned that very little about Yale Olive Science and Health Institute. We're still on preparing this to be approved. We're trying to secure funding and everything, and essentially it's an effort that I started. This is some wonderful pictures that they have created for us, me and my co-director from Yale, Tassos Kyriakidis, which were here. We hosted the first conference at Yale in, I think, 2018, and then we had the next one in 2019 in Delphi, Greece, but then we had a pandemic, so there was no conference. But starting tomorrow, we have the conference here in Rome. This is the fourth International Yale Symposium on Olive Oil and Public Health, and this is co-hosted by Yale and also the University of Rome Tor Vergata, and also the University, of Bari, Aldo Moro. So we're putting all this effort. If you are here, I think the registration is closed, but you can probably register on the site. It's an amazing conference that talks about olive oil, not only from the health perspective, but also in terms of quality of olives, marketing, and stuff like that. We're not working for any company. We're trying to promote the health effects of the olive oil. With that, thank you so much, and appreciate your time and staying late.
Some question from the audience. Everybody wants to put it up. So, thanks to Professor Patilis and all the speakers today, and thank you to all the guests and present at the workshop. Now we will offer a lunch for everybody outside the plenary room. Please bring back the paper that I gave to you, so we can prepare the attendance certificate. Just leave all the paper